Hi everybody, it's Lauren. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be doing my top 10 books I read in 2017. I know that this is coming a little bit late, but I was really sick for the first half of January and I haven't been able to film and get it up until now, so without further ado, let's just go ahead and hop right into all of these books. I have 10 here, like I said, that I'm really excited to talk about, and yeah, let's just get into it. So I only have 5 of the books here to physically show you. The other ones I don't have because I got them from the library or have given them away to somebody to read as well, so I will insert pictures as I get to those. And like with my top worst video, these aren't going to be in any particular order except for number 1, which is my favorite book. The other books were all pretty much equally good, so I'm not going to put these in a numerical order. So number 10 on my list is Cinder by Marissa Meyer. This was a sci-fi futuristic Cinderella retelling, and I have been meaning to read this book for a very long time, and I finally got around to it last year, and I ended up loving it so much more than I thought I was going to. I'm not very much into sci-fi. I don't read a lot of it, and the fact that it was a Cinderella retelling didn't really compel me to pick up this series for a long time, but I'm really glad that I did because I just absolutely loved the characters. I thought the plot was very fun. It was very unique, and there was just enough of the Cinderella story in there to make it a authentic, true Cinderella retelling. And Marissa Meyer really captivated me with her writing. I absolutely loved the story and thought it was a really great fun start to a series, and I really want to get to the second book, Scarlet, sometime this year. I just was completely blown away by how much I ended up liking this one, and hoping that the rest of the series really lives up to my expectations. So number 9 on my list is The Shadow King by Jo Marchant, and this is actually a non-fiction book that's all about King Tut's mummy, and basically from the time that they found it until now, what happened to it, all of the studies that have been done about it, and all the different theories regarding King Tut's death and how he ended up in the tomb he ended up in and all of that fun stuff. Now, I know that this book probably is not for everybody, but I really loved it. I thought that it was a very easy to understand, very accessible and engaging nonfiction book. Especially if you're into Egyptology, I think you would really get into this book. Jo Marchant is very non-biased in her approach to talking about King Tut, and she kind of saves her opinion for right at the end. The rest of the book was just a lot of fun. I learned a ton of stuff from reading this book, and it went into so much more than just his mummy. There was a lot of talk about the beginnings of Egyptology as a field, and just I had a great time reading it, and I didn't really expect to. This book definitely was one of my favorite I read this year, and I just had so much fun with it. Number 8 on my list is Winter Song by S.J. Jones. This was a very loose labyrinth retelling, and I had gone into it expecting it to be more like the film, but this was actually nothing like that. And I'm kind of glad that it was very different because I ended up enjoying it quite a lot. I will go on to saying that I'm not sure that this book is for everybody because it was very slow paced. The writing style also seemed to change throughout the course of the novel, and it was a very interesting read, but I honestly really liked it just because I thought that the characters were all very interesting. Honestly, I wasn't that big a fan of Liesel. She just didn't really connect to me, and I did have a few little issues with the writing, but for the most part this book really stood out to me as being a favorite throughout the year. This book follows a girl named Liesel who loves music and is a musical composition prodigy. However, she's not really respected because she's a female, and she's also kind of living under the shadow of her younger brother who's a master violinist. And then we kind of get into the labyrinth part of the story where her sister is stolen by the Goblin King to be his bride, and Liesel has to kind of go after her sister and try and take her place. There was a lot going on in here, but the writing was so beautiful and so lyrical that I just ended up really loving and enjoying it, and it definitely stood out to me as one of my top 10 books last year. Number 6 on my list is Karvall by Stephanie Garber. This was one of the last books I read in 2017, but I absolutely loved it. This book was about an enchanted carnival that only takes place once a year and never in the same place twice. These two sisters have wanted to go to this carnival their entire life, and they finally get a chance to go and be a part of the audience. The audience gets to take part in the carnival and compete for the chance to win a wish from the Grand Master, and it was just such a beautiful, lyrical, magical adventure. I don't even really want to tell you too much more than that because the book had the most gorgeous writing. It was so visual and luscious and delicious, and I want to go to this world so much. I can't wait to read the sequel. It's coming out later this year and I'm super pumped for it, and I just absolutely cannot tell you how good this book was. It was such a fun adventure from start to finish and I loved it so much. So number 5 on my list is The Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan, and that is the first book in the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series. I loved this book and I can't believe I waited till 2017 to read it. It's been out forever and I just never got around to reading it until now, but I loved it. It was so full of Greek mythology. I just felt like I was completely nerding out. It was so much fun. All the characters were fun and it was just like a nonstop adventure from start to finish. I loved Percy. I thought he was such a fun character and I cannot wait to read the second book. I already went out and bought it because I'm just so excited about reading it, and it was just such a fun middle grade novel. I'm so mad I didn't read it earlier, and it definitely was one of my favorites of the year. So the next book on my list is a memoir, and it is As You Wish by Carrie Elwes, and this book is so special to me because The Princess Bride is probably one of my favorite movies of all time, and Wesley was like one of my first childhood crushes and he's my favorite character in that film. So this book was written by the actor who portrays Wesley in the film, and it was all about his experience making the movie, his relationships with the different actors, his experiences and personal stories, all about getting to film this very magical, just classic film that is so dear to me and so many other people. If you are a fan of The Princess Bride, you have to read this book. It was so good. I laughed, I cried. It had the same kind of magical feeling as the actual film, and knowing it was written by like my favorite character made me love it even more. So this book had to make my list. I loved it so much. The next book on my list is Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins. This was a murder mystery thriller adult book. And normally I don't read those kind of books. Every once in a while I'll pick one up, but The Girl on the Train was very highly recommended to me and I ended up loving it. This was a book where I hated every single character, but they were so like detestable in that good way that I couldn't stop reading it. I was really on the edge of my seat the entire time I was reading the book, and I kept guessing up until the end who the murderer was, and I was wrong. The fact that I couldn't figure out who did it and the fact that it also kept me engaged was very fast-paced and was full of all these like terrible characters that were so fun to read about and not root for. I ended up having a really good time, and I think that if you like murder mysteries, you will really enjoy this one. Next on my list is Before I Fall by Lauren Oliver. This almost made my favorite book of the year. I think I would have to give it the number 2 slot, even though I'm putting it in the number 3 slot. I was so touched reading this book. It felt so authentic. It felt just like a teenager would feel and was written like a teenager would speak. But more than that, this book is about a girl named Sam who kind of has everything she could want. She's one of the most popular girls in school, and it's all taken away from her when she dies in a car crash. The book follows Sam as she relives her last day and sort of learns to cope and deal and accept what's happened to her, as well as learning that all of her actions, all of our actions have consequences. It was a deep, heavy book. There were parts where I laughed, there were parts where I cried. I loved it. I think this is a book everybody needs to read. It was so touching, so heartbreaking, so emotional, and I just enjoyed it so much. So this book had to be in my top 3, and I highly recommend you check it out. So the next book on my list is The Accident Season by Moira Fowley-Doyle. This was a book I picked up at the library just thinking the cover was cool, and I wasn't really expecting anything from the book, to be honest, but it blew me away. This book had the most mystical, eerie quality to it, and I guess I went into it thinking it was going to be some kind of like contemporary novel, but it was more magical realism. It had a horror element, and it was just so beautiful and hauntingly written. The book follows a family who every October goes through something they call the accident season, and they all become extremely accident prone. Some Octobers are worse than others. Sometimes people die, sometimes people only get paper cuts. And our main characters are setting out this October to figure out why this is happening to their family. I don't want to say anything more than that. I think you should just read the book and discover the rest of the story yourself. But it was the most beautiful book I have read in a long time. I really wish I hadn't just got it from the library and I owned a copy. I loved reading it so much, and it was just such a beautiful, mysterious book. I loved every word. Now we're on to my number one pick, and this was my favorite book that I read this year, and I have to give it to Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire. I never in a million years would have thought that this tiny little novella would be my number one book, but it had to be, hands down. I read this book in one sitting in a couple hours because I could not stop reading it. It follows children who have accidentally discovered these doorways, kind of like Alice in Wonderland, and when they get back to our world, they're not able to adjust. And this book had so much potential. I wish it had been like 1,000 pages. I wanted a full-on book for every character that they had in here. I wanted to learn more about all of the different worlds. The writing was gorgeous. This book dealt with some really difficult topics, and all of that was crammed into this tiny little thing. I cannot recommend this book enough. It was phenomenal. I haven't stopped thinking about it since I read it, and I just was sucked in, and it was gorgeous and beautiful, and I can't say enough good things. So please, please, please go read this book. I loved it so much, and it is definitely my favorite book of 2017. So those are my top 10 books of 2017. I really hope that you enjoyed this video, and I'd love to know if you've read any of these books or what your favorite book of 2017 was. If you haven't seen my top 10 worst books of 2017, I will link that down below so you can check out my opposite opinions. And yeah, I will see you guys all in my next video. I hope you're having a fabulous day, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye everybody!